It started with a small leak under the kitchen sink. One of those everyday problems that could have been fixed with a wrench and a bit of patience. But what happened that afternoon turned out to be anything but ordinary. This isn't just about a dripping faucet or a noisy pipe, it's about how something so routine can suddenly shift into something completely unexpected. And what followed changed everything in that household. Maya had been living in that quiet neighborhood for almost 5 years. A single mother, juggling her job, her 10-year-old son, and a home that always seemed to need something fixed. She wasn't the kind to ask for help, not unless she really needed it. That day, she did. The leak had started getting worse, and water was beginning to pool on the kitchen tiles. She didn't have time to wait for a plumber, so she knocked on the door next door, the neighbor, Jake. Jake had always been friendly. The kind of guy who offered a hand when groceries spilled or waved while mowing his lawn. He was in his early 30s, divorced, and quiet most of the time. He'd moved in about 6 months ago, and aside from a few casual conversations, Maya didn't know much about him. But when she asked if he could take a look at the leak, he didn't hesitate. He smiled, grabbed his toolbox, and followed her inside. At first, everything felt normal. He crouched down, inspected the pipe, and made a few jokes that made her laugh more than they should have. It wasn't flirtation, at least not at first. But then the way he looked at her changed, like he was really seeing her. Not just as a neighbor, but as a woman. Maya tried to brush it off, but a strange tension started to build in the room, silent but obvious. Every glance, every word, seemed to carry something more. As Jake worked under the sink, their conversation deepened. They spoke about failed marriages, loneliness, and the way people stop seeing each other when life gets too busy. The air felt thick with unspoken thoughts. He wasn't just fixing a pipe, he was unlocking something that had been buried in Maya for a long time. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Then, just as he tightened the last bolt, a drop of water hit the floor. But it wasn't from the pipe. It was the storm outside, starting to pour. The rain hit the windows hard, loud enough that they both paused. Jake looked up, their eyes met, and for a moment, everything was still. Time slowed, and so did their breathing. What happened next wasn't planned. It wasn't loud. It was quiet, slow, and filled with all the unsaid things neither of them knew how to explain. Jake never left that night. And by morning, the house felt different. But here's the thing, what started as a moment of weakness didn't end there. Because someone saw. And what they did with that secret, well, that's when everything really started to fall apart. The next morning, Maya woke up to a mix of confusion and guilt she couldn't shake off. The rain had stopped, the skies had cleared, but inside her, a storm was still quietly brewing. Jake was already up, standing near the window with a cup of coffee in his hand, as if unsure what to say or do next. There were no promises made, no talks of what it all meant. It just happened. And now they both stood at the edge of something they couldn't name. Maya's son, Ayan, had stayed the night at his grandmother's. That had been the only reason the night had even been possible. The silence in the house felt heavier than usual, not peaceful, but thick with everything unspoken. Jake left quietly not long after, giving her a soft take care before closing the door behind him. It felt final, but also not. What Maya didn't know was that someone had seen Jake leave. Their neighbor across the street, Mrs. Patel, had a habit of sipping her morning tea by the front window. She was known for watching everything that happened in the neighborhood. She didn't say anything at first, but in small communities, silence rarely lasts. The days that followed were awkward. Jake went back to being quiet, keeping to himself. He didn't text, didn't call, didn't drop by. Maya didn't know whether to feel relieved or rejected. At work, she found it harder to concentrate. Her mind kept replaying that night, not just what happened, but how it made her feel seen in a way she hadn't felt in years. It was confusing. Wrong, maybe. But also real. The real crack didn't come until a week later, when Ayan came home from school, unusually quiet. When she asked, he just said some of the kids had been teasing him, saying things about his mom and the neighbor man. That someone's older sister told them she saw Jake leaving Maya's house early in the morning. The rumor had started to spread. Maya's heart dropped. She tried to act normal, cooking dinner, helping with homework, smiling when needed. But inside, panic was settling in. What had felt like a private moment now had the eyes of the neighborhood slowly turning toward her. And worse, Ayan was caught in the middle. The leak had been fixed, yes. But something else was broken now, something harder to repair. Because the past has a way of catching up, and secrets don't stay quiet for long in places where everyone knows your name. By the end of the week, whispers had turned into stares. Maya felt them at the grocery store, at the school gate, even during her evening walks. No one said anything directly, but their glances said enough. The friendly nods had changed. Conversations stopped when she walked by. And Jake? He avoided her completely now. She hadn't seen him in days, though his car was always parked in the same spot, like he was home but hiding. What made it worse was how Ayan had started acting distant. He wasn't his usual cheerful self anymore. He'd come home, eat quietly, and go straight to his room. Maya tried to reach him, asked him if something else had happened, but he just shrugged. He was hurting, confused maybe, and she didn't know how to explain anything without making it worse. That one night, meant to be a moment of comfort, had started to unravel the life she had worked so hard to hold together. Meanwhile, Mrs. Patel had started visiting more neighbors than usual. Maya saw her more than once standing by someone's porch, leaning in, whispering with that knowing smile she wore too often. The neighborhood felt smaller than ever now. Maya wondered what people were really saying behind closed doors. Was she being called irresponsible? Reckless? Did they see her as someone who'd crossed a line just because she asked a neighbor for help? But the story wasn't just one-sided. Jake had his own struggles. Inside his house, he paced back and forth most nights, torn between guilt and regret. He had been through a rough divorce not long ago. He had sworn to stay out of drama, to focus on work, to live quietly. That night with Maya wasn't something he'd planned. But something about her, her quiet strength, her tired eyes, her laughter that came out like a surprise, had pulled him in. And now, both of them were caught in a mess neither had expected. The real fear wasn't just about being judged. It was about how quickly a single choice could turn into a chain reaction. There was a PTA meeting coming up next week. Maya was on the committee. She already dreaded walking into that room. And deep down, a question kept echoing louder every day. Had this one night of connection cost her everything she had built over the years? Or was something even bigger waiting just around the corner? The night before the PTA meeting, Maya stood in front of her bathroom mirror, brushing her hair with a tight knot in her stomach. It wasn't about the meeting itself, she'd handled dozens before. It was about walking into a room full of people who no longer saw her the same way. People who used to wave, smile, offer rides. Now they looked at her like she was part of some secret they weren't supposed to talk about, but always did anyway. She tried to convince herself it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered because her son's name was being dragged into hallway whispers. It mattered because her quiet, safe home no longer felt like a place she could breathe in. It mattered because she hadn't even had a real conversation with Jake since that night. And still, her heart raced every time she passed his driveway, hoping and fearing he might walk out. At school the next morning, she kept her head up, faked a smile, and walked into the meeting room like nothing was wrong. But the energy was different. The room went quiet the second she entered. She could feel eyes on her, feel the weight of judgment pressing against her shoulders. Even the small talk felt forced, cold. And then, halfway through the meeting, one of the mothers, Tanya, the same one who once invited Maya for tea, spoke up with a tone too sweet to be kind. "Just a reminder," she said, looking directly at Maya, "we all represent the values of this school. especially when it comes to what our children see and hear outside the classroom. Maya froze. No names were mentioned. No accusations spoken aloud. But the message was clear. The silence that followed hit harder than any insult. Later that evening, Maya sat on her porch, staring out at the empty street. The sun had dipped low, and the air was thick with heat and tension. She didn't even notice Jake walking over until he was standing right in front of her, hands in his pockets, eyes heavy with something between apology and fear. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Before she could answer, a car slowed near the curb. It was Tanya. She rolled past slowly, her eyes meeting Maya's with a look that said she saw everything. Ayon's voice called from inside the house, unaware of the storm his mother was standing in. And just like that, the night began to shift toward something neither of them could control anymore. The sound of Tanya's car fading down the street left a sharp silence between Maya and Jake. He shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the window where Ayon's shadow moved behind the curtains. "I think people are starting to talk more than we realized," he said, his voice low. "This isn't just about us anymore. It's about your son, your name, everything." His words were heavy, almost like a warning, but Maya wasn't sure who he was warning, her or himself. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the table. It was an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. The voice on the other end was calm but firm. "Is this Maya Ahmed? I think we need to talk about what's going on with you and your neighbor." The line went silent after that, but the voice left an echo in her mind. It wasn't a threat, exactly, but it didn't feel safe either. That night, sleep was impossible. Every creak in the house felt louder, every shadow outside felt like someone watching. She thought about the voice on the phone. Who was it? Could it be Tanya? Or maybe Mrs. Patel, taking things too far? The thought of being the center of a rumor was bad enough, but now it felt like something else was happening, something bigger than just gossip. The next day, Ayan came home from school with a folded piece of paper in his backpack. Maya almost missed it, but when she opened it, her hands went cold. It wasn't from his teacher. It was a note written in messy handwriting: "You should be careful who you let into your house. Some people are watching." She felt the walls closing in. It wasn't just judgment anymore, it was personal. Someone was deliberately trying to rattle her. She rushed next door and knocked on Jake's door, holding the note like evidence. "Did you get anything like this?" she asked when he opened the door. His face paled. He nodded slowly, then went back inside and returned with his own crumpled note. "We all see what you're hiding." They both stood there, stunned. This wasn't just neighborhood gossip, it felt like someone was deliberately stirring up trouble, pushing them towards something they didn't understand yet. "Who would do this?" Maya whispered. Jake didn't answer, but his eyes flicked toward Tanya's house across the street. As if the tension wasn't enough, later that evening Maya's ex-husband called out of the blue. He hadn't spoken to her in months, but now his voice was laced with anger. "What's going on over there? Ayan mentioned something, people are saying things about you and some guy. Is this true?" His tone cut like a knife, each word adding more weight to the already unbearable tension. Maya stood there, clutching the phone, realizing the storm she was in wasn't just whispers and notes anymore. It was creeping into every part of her life, her son, her reputation, her past. And the worst part? She had no idea who was behind it all, or how far they were willing to go to destroy her. Two halves the days that followed felt like walking through a storm with no umbrella. Maya couldn't ignore the tension any longer. The notes, the whispers, her ex's calls, it was all piling up, suffocating her little world. She decided to confront it head-on. She arranged a meeting with some of the neighbors, hoping to clear the air and stop the rumors before they tore her family apart. Jake agreed to stand by her side, even though the risk of exposure terrified them both. The evening of the gathering arrived. The community center was small, packed with familiar faces, some curious, others judgmental. Maya's heart pounded as she stood in front of them, trying to steady her voice. I know there's been talk. Things have been said about me and Jake. I want to be honest, because I owe that to my son and to all of you. She paused, catching Jake's supportive glance. Yes, Jake came over to fix a leak, and yes, he stayed. But nothing else happened between us. What you're hearing is exaggerated, and it's hurting more than just me. A silence fell over the room, thick and heavy. Then Mrs. Patel, the neighbor who had always been watching, stood up. Maya's right, she said, her voice steady. There's been gossip, but sometimes what we hear isn't the truth. We all make mistakes, but we don't have to destroy someone's life over them. A few others nodded, murmurs of agreement spreading. For the first time in weeks, Maya felt a flicker of hope. But then, just as relief was settling, Tanya stood up from the back, her face pale but eyes sharp. I didn't spread rumors to hurt Maya, she said. I was worried. There's something you all don't know. She pulled out her phone and showed a series of messages between Jake and someone else, someone who wasn't Maya. The messages revealed that Jake had been hiding another secret. He'd been involved with a woman in the next town over, someone who claimed he promised to leave his old life behind. The truth hit Maya like a blow. Jake had been honest with her in the moments they shared, but there was a past he hadn't told her, a part of his life tangled with lies. Jake looked at Maya, regret filling his eyes. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said quietly. I wanted to be honest, but I was afraid. The room buzzed with shock and questions. Maya's heart ached, but beneath the pain, a strange calm washed over her. She realized that while the leak under her sink had been fixed, the real mess was the secrets people kept. Some truths hurt, but they also set you free. In the days that followed, the neighborhood slowly healed. The gossip faded, replaced by cautious understanding. Maya and Jake decided to part ways, both needing space to rebuild their lives with honesty at the center. Just when Maya thought the storm had passed, she found a final note slipped under her door. It read simply, "Not everything is as it seems. Watch your back." The message sent a chill down her spine. Someone was still watching. The leak had been fixed, but the cracks were far from over. After finding that chilling note, Maya felt a deep mix of fear and determination. She wasn't going to let this shadow linger over her life any longer. She talked openly with Ayan, explaining in simple words that sometimes people say things to scare others, but they couldn't let fear control them. It was important to face challenges head-on, with honesty and courage. Slowly, the neighborhood began to change. The whispers faded, replaced by genuine smiles and tentative conversations. Mrs. Patel, who had once been just a watcher from her window, became one of Maya's unexpected allies, often stopping by to check on her and offer quiet support. Even Tanya, who had stirred the tension, softened over time, realizing that suspicion and rumors only tear people apart. Jake moved away a few weeks later. Their brief connection had brought both comfort and chaos, but in the end, it reminded Maya how crucial honesty is, not just with others but with herself. She understood that trusting again was hard, but healing started when she stopped blaming herself and let go of the things she couldn't control. The leak under the sink was fixed long ago, but the bigger leaks, the secrets, the rumors, the misunderstandings, taught Maya valuable lessons about resilience and community. She knew her story wasn't unique, that many face moments where a small crack can threaten to break everything. But what mattered was how you chose to respond. As she watched Ayan play in the backyard, laughing without a care, Maya felt a quiet strength growing inside her. The fear and shame were still there sometimes, but they no longer defined her. Instead, she focused on building trust, being open, and surrounding herself with people who lifted her up rather than tore her down. In the end, the neighbor who came to fix the leak stayed for more than just the night. He stayed in her memories and in the lessons she carried forward. And though some parts of the story remained uncertain, Maya had found peace in moving forward, one honest step at a time. This true story reminds us that life's unexpected moments can test us in ways we never expect. But with courage and openness, even the deepest cracks can heal, and new beginnings can grow from the hardest endings. 2.